Hello and welcome to 9-Inch Charge. The Old World show is back. I know it's been a while, but think of this as the second edition. We've got lots of upcoming content planned. I'm recording with Tom tomorrow to chat about one of the articles and the Old World in general, and I'm hoping to get Sean, a subscriber, on to talk about his various armies. Today we have Jeremy with us, a very good friend of mine and long-time Dark Elf player, and we're going to talk about the latest Warhammer community article where they announced square bases. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you very much. It's good to be on the show.
So just to quote the article, it says here, we've kept a very close eye on the responses on social media. All manner of theories have been presented about the setting and the game set within it. And while some are preternaturally insightful, some are as far off as a drunken snotling attempting to bullseye a hoghound with a catapult-launched puffball. So Jeremy is someone who has definitely so far been spot on about this where I have not been. So I thought I'd bring him on the show today just to say, I told you so.
I did tell you so.
So why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself, Jeremy, where you started in the hobby and kind of where you are now with everything Warhammer Fantasy Battles.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Dan. Yes, I think I started probably getting into Warhammer about 2000, 2001. We were probably about 13 at the time, and just about the early-ish release of 6th edition. So back when Ravaging Hordes was still a thing, pretty much just had like Empire and Orcs and Goblins out at the time. And it was kind of like something that me, and a couple of our school friends really sort of got into, and sort of like, so I guess kind of like a sort of like one of our key hobbies when we were teenagers. I think it's probably fair to say. Like I said, I had like a massive Dark Elf army, which I've never quite finished painting. But, I have aspirations, which I think is important in the hobby.
It's the true sign of a hobbyist that you have an unpainted model in your collection.
Exactly. And in my case, it's actually now a shelf of just unpainted models. I kind of got into Warhammer from about 6th edition onwards and kind of played it pretty much through unto the end of 8th edition, and then as the end time sort of rolled in, I guess started to, probably it's fair to say, move away from the hobby, and left Games Workshop behind, I guess it would be fair to say, as Age of Sigmar rolled in. But no, it was a big part of my life. Obviously, it's something like we and our friends did while we were at school. It's also something that I did with my brother as we were growing up. It's sort of painting, playing, collecting together. So it wasn't just a hobby. It's something that I guess I got a huge amount of like nostalgia and like an emotional connection with. And so this new announcement today, like, was pretty much confirming that the game is coming back more or less as it was before, with square bases and all the rest of it. I'm sure we'll get onto this more in a minute. Was like definitely a moment for dancing up and down and enjoy, because it's like that return to that game that I knew and loved.
I was thinking about us playing when we were teenagers the other day, and I was remembering that your parents in their living room had a rug that was exactly 6x4.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I used to think that when you were judging charge distances when we were playing on the rug, like, it had a symmetrical pattern, and I'd think, right, so we'd start 24 inches away, and it's 12 inches to the middle of the pattern, and then I try and like mark my movement across it, and then just remembering all those things. And then also the harrowing memories of being annihilated by your Cold War Knights.
It's funny looking back on this now, because honest to God, I hadn't measured that carpet, so honestly I had no idea how long it was. But so it's funny that you thought that. And my memory actually of playing games is more being destroyed as my troops attempted to get across the board and generally didn't make it into combat, because obviously Wood Elves a little bit good at shooting, Dark Elves not so good with the armor. But it's funny how we remember it. But yeah, and also just the joy of playing against 6th edition Wood Elves, which were kind of felt like a 40k army had gone on a holiday, gone camping in some woods, and forgotten ever to leave, and forgotten what game system we were meant to be playing, as good as they were.
You're not the only person who said that to me. Well, I'm pleased you still got your army. I'm pleased that it's out on the shelf. I don't know if you remember, but when the end times happened and Age of Sigmar was announced, there was someone who had a Dark Elf army that burned it. So I'm pleased.
I did think that was insane. Yours. No, I was never. I was a little bit angry and a little bit emotionally distraught, but I wasn't gonna go that far. I was going to be the stubborn dwarf that was going to continue to play to get the old rules no matter what.
Well, it looks like you're in luck, Jeremy, because it looks like from this new article, Games Workshop are trying to get you back. They're going after the old rank and flank style fantasy game. So looking out for players like yourself, Ninth Age players and Kings of War, which I think makes sense looking back at the things that I was thinking that I wanted to see from the game. They don't want me. Well, they do want me to buy this game, but they don't. They're after someone like you, I think, more than they've already got my money. So
I think that's fair. And it's one of those things that I've been really interested about, what I'm thinking through is how does Games Workshop bring back in players like me while making this a financially viable product for them? And that's kind of, I guess, the way I've kind of approached all of this is it's not what I want to see, but how Games Workshop can fundamentally make cash off me, because it is a product, it's a range, they need to make money and a profit from it. So that's kind of a lot of what my thinking is. I wonder how they can best do that. Just got sort of along my thoughts about it.
I think by being the best miniatures creating company in the world, if you look at the newer stuff that they've been releasing, an example would be the new vampire range. Like the way they've updated that and the way the models are and some of the motions that's carried in it. I think if you look back to your shelf and look at your metal harpies and imagine what they can do with those now, you know, that I think it'll be quite a pull for people who invested in their old armies.
I like how we automatically go to possibly one of the worst models that Games Workshop ever produced as a comparison. But the point is valid still, absolutely. I think, yeah, Games Workshop's model range has just come along in so many leaps and bounds. But it's funny actually you mentioned vampires, because that new model range, and because I'm a bit out of date with Age of Sigmar, I can't remember exactly what they're called, but so many of the models like the zombies, the new skeletons, the bats, the wolves, all that sort of thing, I looked at them and thought, are you already preparing your Age of Sigmar range to some extent to be backwards compatible? Because most of those models could work in a Warhammer Old World gaming system, because they're the same classic units that we know from the past, just updated. And if you chuck them onto square bases, they would work pretty much as is. So I'm really interested to see, actually, as Games Workshop starts to release more models for Age of Sigmar, whether it kind of makes them compatible so that they can just be flipped off. And flipped off, that's a terrible expression to use, and we won't remember that.
Well,
but whether they can just be changed off. Yeah. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see whether they start to release stuff with round and square bases.
There's also a bit of a psychological pull there, not just a physical pull, because the models, then the names of them, you know, they are, when we went to Age of Sigmar, elves became elves and orcs become orcs and things like this, and dwarves became dwarden. But you know, you've got a model. This is a vampire lord, so I think there's something there that might, you know, inflame the imagination a bit more and make you think of the old world just in terms of like the names of the units as well as the aesthetic.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, from Games Workshop's point of view, if you can make a model which appeals to both AOS players and older players from Warhammer Fantasy Battles or the Old World, then that opens up your market, and that, you know, you can sell more models at the end of the day.
All right. Shall we go through the article?
Let's do that.
Okay, so the first thing straight away, which is something I was wrong about and you were right about, so prepare yourself for your catchphrase for today, is square bases. So definitely square. Warhammer The Old World is a reinvention of the classic rank and flank game from Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Regiments moved in ranked up units, and strategic maneuvering into position to launch or receive critical charges will be a key part of the game, as it ever was.
So yeah, definitely music to my ears. I mean, I'm happy to admit that some models do look nice on round bases, but I still want them together in some way. So yeah.
For me, what I thought about this was, you know, and I was someone who exploited this quite a lot, is the movement was very clunky, I felt, in Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And I always had a Great Eagle or two spare to put, you know, 1 inch away, and then a big like block of unit men couldn't go within an inch without charging, and then they'd have to move back, and then they'd have to wheel, and they'd have to go around. Or if they then went into the Eagle, it was going to flee, you know, and things like that. I felt like we need to try and get away from and try and make the game a bit smoother, because, or just stop people taking eagles, I suppose.
Well, I mean, I know exactly where you're coming from because I used to try and use my Dark Elves in exactly the same way. Generally, not quite as successfully as you did, if I'm being brutally honest with myself. And also, the aforementioned ugly ass harpies. So I think there is definitely something there. If we're talking about like how I want to see the rules change, I think the movement phase was an absolute cow, and I think you want a game system where actually you can interact with terrain and make it part of the game, not just try and avoid it like the plague, because it's just going to literally cause all your models to fall off the bases, and and everything just to sort of snare up like I don't know. You're in a muddy field in the First World War and just can't do anything. So I think, yeah, absolutely. We need that. Hopefully there will be a simple, easier to use system of movement, and it is obviously harder with a square basis. I don't quite know what they're going to do, but I hope that is going to be forefront in their minds as they develop the game.
Yeah, I'd like, as you said, I'd like to see a bit of a tweak to it. It's cool to see it come back. When they announced it, although it wasn't something I was necessarily expecting, I thought, oh right, cool. I definitely want to work with that. I love playing 8th edition, 7th edition, 6th edition. I love playing all those editions of the game. And Rank and Flank, when they announced it, I did actually think, do you know what? Actually, there is something about that I do miss. So that will be cool to see.
There's nothing quite like getting like a really good like flank charge or rear charge on the opponent.
Yeah, hopefully they make it feel rewarding and more difficult to do.
Yeah, for sure.
The next is the scale of the game. So there are rumours going around it's going to be 10 mil or 15 mil. And the response is, what? No, what madness is that? The scale will remain the same as it ever was. We want people to be able to use their old armies if they wish, or start new ones, or to add miniatures to old armies, whatever they want. And
I thought that was really reassuring because, to be honest, if I wanted to play a 10 mil game, there's something called Warmaster that I could play. And it's never, although there's nothing wrong with that game, it's never really a scale that's particularly appeals to me. So that was really reassuring. Also, it's really nice to have an acknowledgement of games which are saying, hey, like you said, old players, come back to us. You can use your old models. So yeah, it was an incredibly smart move for Games Workshop to come out and like publicly state that. So yeah, good on them.
I think this is something, in my opinion, that's targeted towards Mantic, because Kings of War, to be honest, is a really good rule set, and it's a good rank and flank game. It's solid, but the model range from Mantic is poor, I think, to say the least, in a lot of areas. Some of the models are good, but they're just a really mixed bag, and often they are subpar, in my opinion. And people end up buying Games Workshop models to play Kings of War. So I think this is Games Workshop saying, look, we're going to make a game, and you can use the armies that you've still been using in your other rank and flank games to play our game. Yeah,
absolutely. In fact, I don't know if you saw that Mantic did a really good, so cheeky Facebook ad where they said, like rank and file and square bases, why wait 2 years? Play our game now. I was like, yes. Give your social media manager a pay rise, because that's amazing.
They are quite good at stuff like that. Part of me does think that their business model is piggybacked off of people who like Games Workshop, and I don't think that's necessarily the best way to run your business, but that was funny.
It was really good.
So yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. I'm quite relieved by that, because I've got a load of old Glade Guard that don't exist in the game anymore, and I've got 20 5th edition Way Watchers that I want to use as well.
20?
Yeah.
Oh my word.
I use them as Shadow Warriors in my Age of Sigmar army, and I don't think I even had 20 of the old metal ones when I was like at my height in Warhammer Fantasy, but I just decided I wanted them, so I scoured eBay to add some extra to my collection, and now I've got 20.
That is a formidable amount of troops there, and I will go and buy more bolt throwers because that's my default response to that.
Just mow them down.
Yeah.
Next up is rules, totally new or 8th edition. So it says both. We've played every single edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles over the years. And like every player, we have our favourite bits from each. Warhammer The Old World will gather up all our favourite mechanics from 3rd edition to 8th edition and add new elements where needed to create something deeply familiar yet fresh and new.
Yeah, so what would your ideal rule set be, Dan? I'm curious. I mean, we've only really played from like 6th to 8th, so we don't know probably 4th and 5th as well. But yeah, what were your thoughts?
I don't want well, I know what I don't want more than I know that what I do want, I suppose.
Yeah, ditto.
So, as much as I've enjoyed all of the editions, I didn't like the push towards Horde units in 8th edition.
Agreed. Yeah.
It felt like a bit of a cash grab, to be honest. Like, just buy more models if you want them to work. And I didn't like how powerful spells were in 8th edition as well. I can remember I played a game against Tom where I set up. This is when I had my lizard men, and I set up all my lizard men. And I had all my temple. I didn't have any skinks because I just liked the big dinosaurs. So I had my temple guard, and then I had my Saurus warriors. I think I had 2 Hordes of Saurus warriors, a unit temple guard with a slan in, and then I think he purple sunned across the whole of the army in turn 1. Take an initiative test or die, and then I was like, right, do I just shake hands now?
Yeah. It's a weird one because in many ways I think the Horde rule and the overpoweredness of magic kind of worked hand in hand. So yeah, like you said, I didn't like the Horde rule because A, it felt like a cash grab. B, it's not much fun painting loads and loads of the same model. Like painting 20 models is fine. Painting 40 plus models, that's a drag. And so I think that probably did alienate a certain amount of people from it. But also it made it more expensive to enter the game.
Yeah.
And also it made armies quite formulaic. And I think maybe that's probably the worst criticism you could level at it, really, is that you started to always know what, if you were facing a particular army, what combination it'd have. They go, oh, they're going to have a horde, a horde of witch elves with a cauldron, because of course they are. And you ended up with sort of hordes sort of facilitated Death Stars, which had always been a thing, but it made it far more common and far more universal. And that made games predictable, a bit samey. And then the only counter to that was then to, irresistibly cast, the most powerful spell in the lore to try and then take it out. So you had to do it in order to try and give yourself a chance. So I think if you remove hordes, that becomes less of a need. It also reduces the entry level of it and makes the game cheaper and easier to get into, which I think will be a good thing as well. I kind of suspect that GW will try and make the amount of models you need lower. That I don't have any evidence for that. I just think it's probably makes good business sense to try and do that. And I think hopefully the removal of hordes will help. I did kind of like the OP of magic a bit. I kind of, in many ways, although I'm a Dark Elf player, there's definitely a little bit of the Skaven in me that I kind of like just to go sod it, we'll find out what happens. And so I did kind of like having these massive spells where just it could go off in your stupid face, and that was fine. But yeah, I think I'd like to see a certain amount of like chaotic randomness in the game, whether that's like you run into a forest and you don't know whether it's going to like come alive and eat you or just make you stupid, all that sort of stuff. But again, having that sort of randomness, whether that's in spells or terrain, I think would be quite cool to keep.
I'm really surprised to hear that you want stupidity to come back.
Not on my knights. My wonderful Dark Elf knights that were always stupid at the worst time. But I like the fact that, like, I think one of the cool things about the Warhammer world is that it is, because it's steeped in magic, it is utterly unpredictable, and like you don't know whether like a lamppost is suddenly going to come alive and try and strangle you or give you a hug. You just don't know, and so I like the idea that terrain can be slightly unknowing and you don't know what's going to happen to it, which again is why I kind of want movement to be fun, because you can actually interact with this stuff as well.
The only other thing that I think I wouldn't want to see is, I think it was 6th edition. Now, I may well be wrong on this, but there was an edition that we played where if you went first, like if you charged or something and you wiped out the first rank, then the opponent couldn't attack back. And I feel like playing Age of Sigmar, especially in this new edition, it's very interactive and you can be disruptive in your opponent's turn. And I feel like Warhammer Fantasy Battles, especially with that combat mechanic, was very much like, okay, go and make a cup of tea because your opponent's going to like go and do their turn now.
Especially if you're playing against me.
So I'd like to see a bit more interaction, even if it is just, you're able to strike back and not have just your front ranks obliterated and then, by a chariot charge or something like that, and then not be able to attack back. Or I want you to be able to feel part of it almost equally in each player's turn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so I've been playing a bit of X-Wing, and one of the nice things about it is that you don't just do all of your turn and the opponents, is that you alternate between the ship with the highest pilot skill goes, and then the next one, so you can almost alternate. And I quite like the fact that it's never more than a couple of minutes before you get to do your thing or react to it. So yeah, absolutely. I think something where, like you said, you don't they start to learn a foreign language while someone else is doing their turn will be quite a nice thing. And yeah, it was a weird one about the wiping out of the front rank. I don't quite know where I stand with it. On the one hand, I quite like Steadfast. On the other hand, it did kind of make combat a bit of a slog, and it was harder to get that devastating charge to turn an enemy and make them flee. And it also comes back into the mechanic of cavalry versus infantry, and I think when we were playing 6th and 7th, cavalry was just amazing. It would just steamroll over because it wiped out the front rank and there was nothing you could do, and then you had to flee. Obviously in 8th ed, cavalry kind of got nerfed. I don't think Games Workshop has quite found the sweet spot yet between cavalry and infantry, and how do you make a really a spearman block really anti-cav, but still make cav be able to deliver that devastating charge against the right kind of opponent. So I think there's something there. I don't quite know what the rule mechanic should be, but I think there's definitely some. It could be improved, I think, for certain.
For me, I think it was always that if you charge, you get to strike first, and then cavalry always got their charge because they had massive movement and they could pick their charges, and that's kind of where it came from for me. I don't know if they moved to an initiative-based system, if it would help, because if I play you'll just have cavalry with amazing initiative.
It was a weird thing though, because initiative didn't really matter in 6th and 7th edition because it was all about the charge. Combat never lasted a turn 2. So if you were elves with initiative 10 or whatever, who cares? Because if you're not there after turn 1, it's a useless stat to have. And that's one of the things that I did like about 8th edition, is that initiative finally meant something in the same way that strength really meant something. So yeah,
I think just before we move on to the next one, going back to what you said about the rules, there's been a shift in Games Workshop recently where in Age of Sigmar and in 40k, the core rules are available for free. And I think that really helps barrier to entry. And also, I can't wait to read what they do with them. Hopefully, it's not so thick. I mean, ultimately, I think the core book became a reference, really, than something you could read and take in. And I just kind of learned the updated rules as I went along and learned through playing rather than sitting down and reading all of it, I think. But I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully they give them away for free as well. And also they've been giving away, there's a shift away from this now, but they're giving, when you buy your models, it will come with sort of basic stats in the book, in the box. So the rules are free. You buy your models, the stats are in there, and you can start to move them around and start to play a basic game.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really smart decision for Games Workshop. Just get people into the shop, get them to go home, build it, and then immediately start playing, and not realize they've got to go back to the store then to pick up the rule book or whatever else. So yeah, anything to get people hooked quickly is smart. I mean, if we're talking about rules, then I do wonder how they're going to bring back in all the other armies as quickly as possible. And I kind of assume they were going to do sort of a Ravaging Horde style thing where they have one book that has basically the stats for pretty much every single army, so that you can pretty much pick up and play from day one. And that way you sort of bring back all the old players, regardless of whether they collected Orcs and Goblins or Ogre Kingdoms or Tomb Kings or whatever it's going to be. And then probably later on they sort of go to town with a fancy book with lots of fluff and the background and context and painting guides. That's kind of what I assume they do it.
I really want a fancy book. If you look, because this game is being made by Forge World, if you look at the Horus Heresy, they've got leather-bound tomes, Jeremy, and they just look gorgeous. I'd really want a leather-bound tome.
You said Forge World. Do we know that for certain?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I'm hoping it's still plastic and not resin.
Yeah.
It's not a main studio game. It's being made by Forge World. I think it's going to be a spin-off, like 30K is from 40K. It's going to be kind of it's not really an Age of Sigmar spin-off, really. It's a reimagining, isn't it? I don't want to call it, because Age of Sigmar is the spin-off, if anything.
Or a sequel? Maybe a sequel, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what's the next one we got? Faction, Orcs or Aurochs? The boys was called Orcs in the Old World, so that's what they's called.
That was a nice phonetic cover on that.
We need Dan on, don't we? We need Dan
absolutely.
to do the voice for stuff like that. But I think that's good. No one knows or cares what a Dwarden is. Everybody who plays Age of Sigmar still says elves instead of Aelf or whatever it is.
It's I guess the interesting question then is what do they do with the old range? Do they just re-release it all as is? I'm assuming they wouldn't, or do they start to bring out reinvent the entire range again? So does that mean that we have an Age of Sigmar orc range and then a fantasy orc range? So yeah, who knows?
I'd quite like to see them go down the route of looking at things that we didn't necessarily see before. So if you look at the setting, where the timeline is, it's set before the Great War against Chaos, and during that war is when Teclis came over to the Empire and was like, right, we'll better teach the humans how to start using magic, because otherwise we're going to lose this war. So you'll have some sort of, I imagine, not quite a battle mage and things like that, and that's what I want to see explored. Is you'll have your usual tropes, but you might get a different unit type or something like that, is what I'm hopeful for, just to explore the narrative a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And also to explore the microcosms more of the old world. So previously you would just have the Empire, but you would never spend much time looking at the units from a particular city in the Empire or a particular city in Bretonnia. And obviously it was more than just the heraldry and the colours on the flag state that to see if they've got particular units or particular army lists, and to have that sort of individualization or personalization
play
on
styles,
them. Yeah. I think that there's definitely room for Games Workshop to expand into land it hasn't looked at before, and that will make it fresher and more exciting for the old, tired, jaded people like myself.
I think that can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. They have to get it just right, because, like you said before, where people were creating Death Stars and they had the same kind of army every time. What can happen if you do that is that there is, within your sort of various sub-factions, there might be one build that's just much better, and you won't get people necessarily go towards the narrative. You'll get them go towards those certain builds, which is something that we see in Age of Sigmar.
Balance, the age-old problem of a war game.
Well, yeah, it's all the age-old problem is always, why is the brand new thing not balanced?
There might be commercial reasons for that.
And the other one is, why are Pegasus Knights just so damn good?
Because nothing else in the Bretonnia army is anymore. That's not true. Trebuchet. Okay, apart from that.
Okay, so setting. What about the world's ending? So, keen-eyed observers will have gleaned by now that Warhammer The Old World is going to be set several hundred years before the end times, so there's plenty of space to explore the history of the setting. Especially knowledgeable students may also note that this puts us just before another calamitous chaos invasion, and one which, while central to the story of the Empire and the entire Old World, was barely touched on in previous iterations. So we've kind of just sort of touched on that already. I don't have too much more to say, really, than it's a great little space because it really does give free reign. The Wood Elves are doing a bit. They're fighting a war against the Beastmen. The Empire, not the Empire, Bretonians are fighting a war against the Orcs. Empire are just recovering from a war against the Von Carsteins. But there isn't anything massively world-changing going on, really. It's it's business as usual, in a sense, which I think just gives them lots of space to put in their own things that they want to do. I suppose they don't have to follow a particular narrative. It's not written in a time where you're going to do the War of the Beard, for example. You've got more space, but I would like to see the narrative progress, and I wonder if we will see something like you'll start off. You might see something to do with Nuln or something, and then you'll see the rise of Magnus the Pious, and then you'll see the Empire kind of forging alliances and eventually fighting chaos. I don't know if we'll see a campaign like that, but I'd quite like to see it go somewhere from where it starts.
I know that's one of the things that Age of Sigmar has done quite well, isn't it? They have progressed the storyline along, and I could definitely see the appeal of doing that.
There's so much stuff written. Like, I was just talking about the War of the Beard, but we would always read our army books and we go through the lore, and we'd read about the same battle every time a new book came out. But they were just part of the faction, and there was never anything that we did looking back, and never anything we did looking forward in the whole of Warhammer Fantasy battles, except for like the odd sort of Albion campaign and stuff like that.
There was a White Dwarf issue once, but the fact that I say the word once kind of like highlights your point, where they did release like a War of the Beard army list for like High Elves and Dwarfs, but like that was the only time anything like that really happened. But that was cool, to go jump back in the past and see how those armies used to fight in the past compared to how they do in the present. It's absolutely. It was very static, I think it's fair to say.
So more. I guess we want to see the lore pushed forward a bit more. All right, that's the whole of the article there, Jeremy. But I thought what we would do next, just for a bit of fun, is that someone has put some rumours up on Reddit. And, if the rumours are going to be true, they're going to be on Reddit. But equally, if the rumours are going to be absolute nonsense, they're also going to be on Reddit.
I see we're keeping our options open here, just in case we look back in the future and go, oh no.
So these are the wild card ones.
Excellent.
So the first one is the Old World will be in multiple languages, and the plan is for Games Workshop to take a slice of the market they no longer cater for. So the multiple languages is interesting because not all of the books get other languages. But I wonder if that's true, if they're going to do anything with Black Library as well, because they do sort of German releases and things like that. So I think what that says to me is that the rumor is that they're planning it to be, a worldwide release sort of from day one.
Yeah, and that makes sense because obviously, to a certain extent, Games Workshop are piggybacking off the success of the Total War game series, which obviously has a global market, and therefore you want to make it obviously fully accessible to people throughout the world as well.
Yeah. The next one was Square bases, no adapters, which we've just seen confirmed already. Interesting idea that you might get adapters, because there are companies that sell adapters from Square to Round.
And I was thinking about, I think it's Song of Fire and Ice miniature game series, where they're on circular bases, but then you fit them onto a larger rectangular base. And I did initially think that Games Workshop might try and do something like that. So that's one of those rumors on Reddit where I thought, maybe, even though Games Workshop said, they're going to be on Square bases, doesn't mean you couldn't necessarily accommodate adapters. So I don't know. I'm still like keeping an open mind about that one, because I think maybe there's Games Workshop got a little bit of wiggle room there in the way they framed it.
The next one is lots of books and games set in an unexplored time period. So I think we've already said that we don't think we'll see lots of books straight away, but it'll be nice if they get to a point where there are lots of books.
Yeah, absolutely. This is so. I'm a bit more. You're going to roll your eyes at this. A bit more cynical about these rumors, because I think that's kind of like a no kidding. Like, you don't need to be a genius to work that one out. Like, Games Workshop are going to release lots of books because they want to make money. Yeah, of course they are.
But I guess lots of books means lots of ranges as well.
It does. So that's a good point as well.
What have we got next? Oh, so this one is a bit more interesting, and I'll roll these two into one. So, game was scheduled to be released alongside Total War, but current things have pushed back the release until 2022, and the starter box is going to be demons versus Kislev, which is the setting of the new Total War game.
So is that rumour implying that Total War is going to be 2022, or that the Games Workshop is going to deliver in 2022?
The Games Workshop game will be dropped in 2022.
Yeah. That kind of makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, really? Because actually, I'm not a computer game coder, but I'm imagining that developing a whole range of models, printing, producing them, producing all the sprues, etc., is going to take a bit longer than producing a computer game. So that's not entirely surprising, is it? I think, because they are piggybacking off a computer game, it makes complete sense that you would hero the two ranges that are taking the limelight for the game as well. And also, we haven't seen Kislev really beyond like a very limited range, and as being a bit of like an add-on to the Empire. So again, it goes back to what you were saying about exploring bits of the old world that we haven't really looked at before. And so having a whole Kislev range would be exciting. It'll be new. It'll attract people who've already got ranges and think, oh, maybe I can, play this new game instead, this new faction instead. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, especially if you've already got people invested in that faction from the game that are perhaps looking to get into something a bit more social than sitting on your own. I'm just cynical about, I get it that computer games are massive, but I'd much rather drink a beer with someone and roll some dice and shake hands and be there in person, I suppose.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I was going to say about that was, I don't know if you've seen the other articles on the Warhammer community website, but the Warhammer design studio from Games Workshop worked kind of hand in hand with the computer game studio to design the units and things like that. So that tells me that, surely the models that we'll see will reflect what we see in the game if the design team is working alongside them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a smart idea, and it sounds like a great collaboration. And it goes back to that interesting thing that when like Warhammer Total War kicked off and became really big, like you suddenly could play with these factions like Bretonnians and Tomb Kings when they'd just literally been decommissioned. So it was always a very odd thing to have happened. So it makes complete sense that Games Workshop would like join the dots there and gone, hang on, we can do something with this.
Oh, I just remembered, Jeremy, that you bought a load of Start Collecting Bretonnia boxes before they went, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I had a pretty good idea that the Bretonnia range was not going to survive, so I bought about 5 starter sets worth of them sitting on my shelf. So that's my pension there. But I do want to actually start to put them together, because I think one of the things, if you want to go back about one of the things that I missed about the old world, it was that slightly more grounded, down to earth, like low fantasy setting. And obviously, Bretonnian peasants rolling around in the mud chewing corn, you can't get more low fantasy than that. So yeah, absolutely.
I tell you what is funny thinking about Bretonnians, if you go back and you watch Monty Python's The Holy Grail,
yeah,
which I did recently, there's quite funny parallels there. There's a bit in the Bretonnian lore where one of the Bretonnian dukes goes mad, and he claims he's already got the Grail, and everyone goes there, and it's like, I've told them we've already got one.
Oh, I'd really like to see some peasants, which are we're going off on a tangent now, which are like doubting why a king should claim the land because he was given a sword by a woman in the leg and all this sort of stuff. Well, socialist anarchist peasants, that's what I want a unit of. There you go, that'll be new. Hope you're listening, Games Workshop.
Well, I think that takes us to the end there. Thank you very much for joining us, Jeremy. It's been a great pleasure chatting to you about the game that we used to play together. And I think the first time we've had a hobby experience where we've not argued.
Oh, there's still time. But no, in all seriousness, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you for inviting me on.
That's great. So Jeremy is going to come back and talk about Dark Elf units for another episode in the future. So watch this space. It'd be great to have him back on and talk about all the times where he just steamrolled me with being outnumbered by a fear-causing cavalry unit and causing my whole army to break and flee off the table.
Good times.
All right, thank you very much for watching, everybody. This has been 9 Inch Charge. Make sure you give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe if you would like to see more content like this in the future. Take care, everyone.